Hello. Welcome back to another podcast episode for the Hello Canal podcast show. My name is Kevin, and good day to you. I hope you guys are well. So, I know it's the last week of April, and let's kickstart this week. Now, for everyone who is in Malaysia and specifically in Selangor or KL, the 29th of April is a upcoming holiday on a Thursday. So if any of you, have any plans for a long weekend, please take the Friday off on April 30th. Although I don't think you'll be able to travel interstate without any good validation or evidence. For instance, if you're working, but please just do take some time off to spend with your friends, with your families. It's been a very, very rough time for everyone. And I hope that, this brings some quality time that you can spend with the people close to you. Remind them that you love them and you really appreciate the time that you have with them. Even if your family is very far away, organize a Skype call, a Zoom call, and just connect with everyone. And just let them know that at times of pandemic, you still think of them and they're still equally important to you. And I've been also chasing back, not to say chasing back, I've been tracing back, where my last conversations with my friends have been, and I've just been catching up with them individually to see where they are, how are things moving along with them. So I think it's very helpful because usually we talk on a very frequent basis, right? But because of this pandemic, everyone has their own additional worries, concerns to look into, and everyone just starts forgetting that there's this other friend, on the other side of the planet that has been waiting for you to connect with and just to help you with whatever emotions or whatever concerns that you may have. So do that. Everyone should have the right kind of support from both friends and families. Who knows, maybe you might just be helping out a friend at the right time where they actually need the emotional or mental support, and that could prevent something from developing further. Okay, so one of my high school friends, he actually committed suicide during the pandemic. If anyone had reached out to him earlier, maybe we could have prevented it. But this is just a reminder for myself, and that's why I'm sharing this information to everyone. Keep in touch with the people close to you because you'll never know when is the last time you'll be talking to them. All right, so now let's get into topic today. We're going to be talking about Bitcoin or cryptocurrency in general. So it's going to be a long topic. I want you guys to get your cup of coffee, tea, just water if you're just a hydrophobic person. Hydrophobic, is that the right term, or hydrotonic? Yeah, okay, just grab a drink. I'm going to take a quick pause here and then let's continue. And we'll be continuing in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, people. All right. Okay, so let's get into the topic of Bitcoin. So for most of us, I think if we've been on social media long enough, or if we've been following the news long enough, you would have eventually heard of this Bitcoin thing. Okay, so Bitcoin, what is it and why is everyone hyping this thing? So let me just give you a bit of the historical background here. Bitcoin was actually registered in August 2008, so that is roughly 13 years ago. On 31st October 2008, this person called Satoshi Nakamoto published a paper called Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. And it was posted to a cryptography mailing list. So this person, Nakamoto, implemented this Bitcoin software as like an open source code and released it in January 2009. As of today, nobody knows who this person is. No one could even trace who this Nakamoto person is. Okay, there's no historical background. There is no such evidence of such person ever alive. So let's move on. Okay, so let's talk about the concept of Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. Bitcoin basically works off the concept of blockchain. Okay, and what blockchain is basically, imagine. Actually, no. Let me just take a step back. Okay, imagine now. Where do you keep your money safe? You go to the bank, right? So imagine you go to the bank, you store $1,000 in cash, you put it in the bank and you say, hey, keep my money safe, I will be back for it later. And you can use that money for whatever purpose that you may need it for, to give someone loan to reinvest it, or to just utilize it. Give me my interest. I'm just going to store it with you, and I'll be back for that money at some point of time in the future. Now, when the bank goes bankrupt, or let's say the bank, gets robbed, for whatever reason, and they no longer have that $1,000 that you placed in there. In fact, they don't have any more money. So you basically lose all of the money there, and there's no way of getting it back, if they declare bankruptcy. Now, in the modern age era where we can store things online, the $1,000 that you used to spend, used to save in the bank, can now be converted into online currency. Okay, but this online currency, when we're talking about Bitcoin specifically, is used very differently. Imagine, rather than having one centralized place to store your money, right, which is the bank, you have 10 different other locations storing your details of your $1,000. Okay, so you switch basically this $1,000 to this online form of currency called Bitcoin. Okay, for instance, as an example, right? And each of these 10 places, locations, they have probably like a computer or a server that acknowledges that you as a customer, or you as a person, have one Bitcoin. Okay, so in the for whatever reason, if out of these 10 places, I know they cannot be robbed, but they can be hacked. So if for online currencies, right, if you're hacked, sometimes you just lose all the money you have within your account. But when there is 10 separate locations that store details of you having this Bitcoin, it validates against each other to say, hey, let's say if you hack the first location, you take that one Bitcoin away from this from a user, right? The other 9 locations will say, report back and say, hey, this is wrong. We did not receive such an information. This is a false activity, right? Which means that the other 9 locations will not be able to say this Bitcoin belongs to this hacker. It still belongs to the original customer themselves, right? And this is the beauty, this is the concept that got Bitcoin to where it is today. The fact that you can convert money into online currency. This online currency is very safe and it's unhackable to a certain extent, where you can just retrieve it anytime you want without any fear of losing it. And one of the beauty of it is, like, of the 10 locations I mentioned earlier, it goes in sequence to say location 1, it goes through a cryptocurrency, or no, it's encrypted. Okay, let's just use encrypted. It's encrypted and the information is sent to location 2. Location 2 is then encrypted once more to be sent to location 3. So each of these locations, they will have what they call as the encryption and the decryption key. Which means that, let's say if you're ever, you own a Bitcoin, for instance, and you're buying a car, right? Let's say if a car is worth 1 Bitcoin as well, when you're transferring, location 1 will retrieve the message or activity that you need to transfer the Bitcoin, which will then send, they'll decrypt the message and say, hey, I'm going to transfer this 1 Bitcoin to this other person, and it will cascade down from location 1, 2, 3, all the way to 10, okay? If at any point of time, the decryption key that is used at a certain point becomes a different user, it doesn't work. It crashes the entire cascading line, right? Which means that, let's say if user A wants to give user B the, the Bitcoin, and at some point of time, let's say in location 4, there's a hacker that says, hey, I'm going to hack into this system. Instead of giving to user B, I'm going to convert this user to pass user A's Bitcoin to be transitioned to me instead as the hacker. And when this happens, location 5 is going to check back with location 4, and location 5 is going to say, hey, this entire activity is already wrong. It doesn't make sense because everything before goes to user B, it doesn't go to the hacker, and it will notify all of the previous locations that something is wrong, and it will revert the transaction. So there's basically a general ledger that is kept by all of the 10 locations to validate whatever activity has been going on. Okay, so this is what they call as a peerless system, and all of the activities are stored well, they call it decentralized, in fact, decentralized system, where all of the money or all of the information of all the Bitcoin activities are stored. There is no way of you hacking it without the other locations realizing it, unless you have, for whatever reason, the ability to hack all 10 locations at once. And these 10 locations are basically just an example. There is definitely more than 10 locations spread out across the world, so it's not a simple activity. All right, now, why is Bitcoin so big? Okay, because Bitcoin was actually designed as a universal online currency. Okay, so back then, for a very, very long time ago, when humans were still sleeping on trees or in caves, the original method of currency, or actually no, before currency we had barter system, which means, hey, I have a goat, you have a cow, I want your cow, do you want my goat? And then they'll exchange it. And then they found a medium currency, a medium kind of midpoint, right? To say, hey, I have a cow, or I have a goat, you have a cow. I want to buy your cow, but you may not be interested in my goat, okay? However, let's put shells on the table. So these are shells, they can be found near the sea, where they're very, very beautiful types of shells. They don't come by very often. So these shells can basically be used as the currency conversion to say, hey, I want to buy your cow. How much do you want? How many shells do you want for the cow? And they'll be like, okay, I want 5. So I'm going to give you 5 shells. I'll get your cow, even though if you don't want my goat. So the barter system becomes more between the form of currency and the goods or services in this case. Now, moving on, once we moved on from shells, we started moving on to real currency, where you have cash, you have coins, and these are made from certain types of metal, right? And this basically becomes a common acknowledged mode of money, right? And eventually this kind of money is implemented under every ruler, right? A long time ago, where we do not have countries yet, every ruler will establish their own kind of currency. And then when we move on, when we started forming countries, that's when, as a country leader, they will say, hey, let's look into cash instead. So then you have your US dollars, you have your Canadian dollars, you have your Australian dollars, you have your euros, your British pounds, Malaysian ringgits, stuff like that. The only problem with this is that all of these currencies are only tied specifically to, let's say, a country's specific usage. I mean, barring euros aside, right? Because that's a complete regional thing. So you have, let's say, Malaysian ringgit and Singapore dollars. This kind of currency can only be used within the country unless you convert whatever money you have to the other respective currency. So let's say if I'm going to Singapore, right, and they do not accept, for whatever reasons, Malaysian ringgit, that means I need to go to a currency converter to say, hey, I want to convert this into Singapore dollars at this specific rate, and then I can use this money to spend in Singapore. Now, the question here is, whatever conversion rate, it always changes on a daily basis, which is fine. But there's an additional step for users to go and to perform the currency conversion and to change the money, to swap it for whatever reasons. Now you are going to replace that with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin's original concept was to have this online currency which can be used globally. So let's say if I want to buy, let's say, a bag of chips, right? I'm from Malaysia, I go to US. Rather than converting my currency to US dollars, I'm going to say, hey, I have Bitcoin. Do you accept Bitcoin? I'm going to give you 1 Bitcoin for the bag of chips. So that is the original concept. It's a unifying, it's a very good thing to unify, the currency across all countries. But yeah, I mean, there are so many complexities which I'll be discussing in today's in today's episode. I'm sorry, still thinking about work. Okay, now let's just take a break here and let's just talk about Bitcoin. How is it going to work? Because Bitcoin, you would expect a fixed rate to say, hey, in order to convert my cash or currency to Bitcoin, there should be a fixed rate a rough estimate of fixed rate, let's say from Malaysian ringgit to $1, it should be every 4 ringgit to $1. It might fluctuate up a bit, or go up or go down a bit, but it should be within that range. That's not the story for Bitcoin. Bitcoin fluctuates like nothing else that you've ever seen. 1 minute it could be 30 cents. This was about 10 years ago. The next minute it's going to be $100,000, right? Like even as of today, as of this discussion, the Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, right, is worth 297,000 ringgit, Malaysian dollars. Okay, Malaysian ringgit. That is 300,000 money, which I'm not sure who can afford. But if you have ever invested in Bitcoin, then good for you. You'll be able to exchange it for a lot of money, a lot of cash. But this Bitcoin concept basically fluctuates so much like it's on the stock market. Any kind of good information or any kind of famous people that have good things to say about Bitcoin will basically increase the price of Bitcoin. Okay, and this is my biggest problem with Bitcoin. Bitcoin, right, back then you could say, hey, I have one Bitcoin, I paid 30 cents for it. Okay, and let's say if we did establish, where a lot of vendors, a lot of merchants, a lot of places where they do accept Bitcoin and say, hey, one Bitcoin can get you one cup of, maybe one can of Coke, 30 cents, for instance. So give me one Bitcoin and I'll exchange it for one Coke. Now, as the price fluctuates, you now have $300,000 instead of 30 cents for one Bitcoin. That Bitcoin now, are you going to exchange it for one can of Coke, right? And all the merchants are definitely going to offer you one can of Coke for one Bitcoin because they're going to earn at the end of the day. But that's never going to happen, right? It doesn't make sense. Back when it was 30 cents, it could be exchanged for one can of Coke, but now that it's worth $300,000, no way in hell am I going to exchange it for one can of Coke. So that means all of the merchants, vendors, all of the places that accept Bitcoin will always constantly need to change their Bitcoin requirements, to say, hey, today, maybe one Bitcoin, you can buy a car. But tomorrow, you're going to need to exchange this for 3 Bitcoins or 2 Bitcoins because the price of Bitcoin has now dropped. There is no consistency in how Bitcoin can be used to purchase things. And that's the ridiculousness of the concept of it, because it fluctuates so much that there's no control, and everyone will not be able to to adapt in time to say, hey, now this Bitcoin is worth so little, we can no longer exchange with you for a house. So Bitcoin is never going to replace any of our current currencies or any of our current way of transactions. Okay, so get it right. Bitcoin will never be a not everyone will buy into this idea because it doesn't make sense. Majority of us will not even buy in because of what I mentioned here, how volatile the pricing is and how it keeps fluctuating up and down. Okay, now let me move on to the second thing here. Bitcoin is not going to work because at the end of the day, people will come up with their own bullshit. Okay, we already have Dogecoin. We have a lot of other cryptocurrencies that are already on the market besides Bitcoin. India is developing their own Bitcoin. Their own cryptocurrency, right? There is nothing that will prevent certain countries from limiting the cryptocurrencies that they can accept, right? So let's say, how should I say this? Okay, Vietnam. Okay, as of today, Vietnam accepts not only Dong, which is their local currency, they also accept US dollars. So let's say in the event of they create some Vietnamese Bitcoin, they might also accept Bitcoin from US. So in that case, if you have one Bitcoin, US Bitcoin, you can go over to Vietnam and spend it, and they'll accept it for whatever currency exchange that it will, whatever rate that it will be, according to their evaluations. Now, if you go to India and India says, hey, you're not allowed to use one US Bitcoin. I mean, not even one. You're not even allowed to use US Bitcoin in general. If you need any kind of transactions, you will need to buy into our India Bitcoin, okay, or India cryptocurrency. And that complicates matters, because when it gets to that point, how is it different from whatever, rupees that India already has versus US dollars in cash, I mean normal currency, versus Bitcoin? So eventually countries are going to come up, not even countries, companies will be coming up with their own cryptocurrencies. It's just going to flood the market once more. The government, or the country leaders, the president, prime ministers, are going to set a precedence to say what cryptocurrencies are going to be allowed in this country and what will be considered illegal, or it won't be generally used. So with that being said, we're going to go back to square one, okay, which is every country, every area, every region is going to have their own kind of currency, right? And you're not going to be able to use this outside of your specific region. So the original concept of Bitcoin, which is to use this as a global currency, online cryptocurrency, is never going to work. Mark my words, it's never going to work. It's a sure fail idea. People don't, if you can understand the concept behind it, right, you will see that this is never going to work. I'm not sure why economists, people are saying that this will work, because if it did, it would have happened a long time ago. We wouldn't wait until today. Okay, so this is just ridiculous. But if you're playing Bitcoin like an investment, where it's more like a stock market idea, right, where you can fluctuate money, you can just invest at a lower price, and once it increases, that's where you you cash out and say, hey, I'm going to sell my Bitcoin for this amount of money. That's where it becomes like a regular stock, which honestly, that's what it is at this point of time. Not many places accept Bitcoins. Even if they do, like what I said, the price fluctuates so much that they're definitely going to have to change their prices of Bitcoin every single day, right? So it makes absolutely no sense. It's not going to work. Bitcoin will forever remain just like a stock market. Mark my words, that's how it's going to be. Okay, so I don't understand, people that are selling Bitcoin. The idea of Bitcoin, they're one of two things. They understand the concept of Bitcoin well enough. They know it's not going to work, but because it's played like a stock market, account, they have already invested money into it. They get you to buy into the idea. The price goes up, they cash out, and you're left with an overpriced evaluation of Bitcoin. Okay, that is, that's how people play stock market to begin with. Get you to buy into the idea, which they already have investments in, and then they'll cash out before you. Or the second thing is they're stupid. They have no idea why, what the real benefits of Bitcoin is, or how it actually works, whether it's actually feasible in the future or not. Okay, they have no clue. So they're the ones that are throwing money in, and they're convincing everyone else. And yeah, it's one of the main reasons why Bitcoin is where it is today at such a high value, because people buy into ideas without really thinking of the future. It just doesn't work. Okay, Bitcoin as a currency does not work. It's not going to work as a universal thing. In the end, it's just going to be like your standard US dollars, or it's just going to be like your stock market accounts. Okay, now let's take a step back and go back to the technology using blockchain. And that's the same technology across all cryptocurrencies, right? Which is the blockchain technology. Blockchain technology is like what I mentioned earlier, where you have 10 different locations going across, keeping, accounts of who has the Bitcoin, who has, bought or sold Bitcoins. And these are what we call as the general ledgers, or the journals, okay? This blockchain activity is good for one thing: information storage, right? Rather than talking about Bitcoin, which has no value really in investing into it, unless you're in it for stock market to gain money through investments. The other thing amazing about this technology is that all of the information of assets can be stored, spread out across these 10 locations, which means if I own a house, all of these 10 locations will know that I own a house, right? And that is beneficial for governments to implement, to say, hey, if this person has this, they need to register under this blockchain technology, and we can trace everyone's assets from any given point of time to say, where has this asset gone to, from this user or from this person to the next person to this other person, right? There is a very clear general ledger to say where the assets have been, whose hands has it been into, right? So this is the real value of blockchain technology. I'm not sure if I leaked that out and now governments are going to implement it, but it prevents people from escaping, let's say, tax, right? And you can also use blockchain technology as a way to trace people. Let's say if they're performing any kind of, if they're, doing some legal or illegal things, right? If they're using money at, places that they shouldn't be, there is a way to trace it. You can implement it in bank systems, for tracing purposes. I'm not sure if they want to do that, but blockchain as a whole is a good idea when it comes to storing information, like assets, where you can clearly see where it's going and who it's going to. And that's where I see the real value. Is something that should be picked up by most companies, and that is the way moving forward, which you can, if you look at it from that way, blockchain will be the real thing to invest in the future. I personally do not play any stock markets. This is just my advice to you. Buy Bitcoin only if you're playing it like stock market, not because you're buying anything, from buying anything through using Bitcoin, right? It's a very, very risky investment if you're using it for transactional purposes, but if you're using it as like a stock market account, go ahead, feel free. But if the blockchain does ever come up, I think that's the way to buy into, and it would be the future moving forward. And that's my recommendation. So for any of you who thinks thinks there are better usages of Bitcoin or just cryptocurrency in general, please do let me know. I'm actually very interested. I'm interested, but I'll definitely, have to put on my logical hat and say, is this really, really something feasible? Does it make sense? Is it going to scale off in the future? Will people buy into it? Okay. If all of this is good, I'll probably do a second podcast episode talking about it, right? But I'm seriously doubting that this will evolve. Bitcoin in general will evolve in any kind of other methods, because the usage is so limited that they cannot really bring enough value as a universal currency. So that's where I stand. Okay. I hope, by listening to, today's episode, you can understand Bitcoin, how it works, what it's like. Is it really feasible in terms of its concept, or should it just be played like a stock market account, right? So hopefully you get the better idea of it, and hopefully you make the right decisions. If you think otherwise, feel free to leave a comment and just share with me, on what your ideas are. Okay, so if you like more episodes, like this, please like, share, and subscribe. Hopefully you guys will, I can do a bit more of this kind of economical discussions, to share more with you. And then if there's any topics that you would like me to talk about, please do let me know. And everyone else, please stay safe, take care, and enjoy the long holiday or weekend. Thanks, guys. Take care. Stay safe.